Week 8, the college football season, it is here, and we've got not one, not two, but three dogs as best bets here for today's show. Plus, we got three big game breakdowns starting soon here as Week 8 kicking off tonight on this Tuesday. We've got three of the best at wagertalk.com going to help us navigate through this week's schedule as BP is in the house, Adam Trigger, as well as Double R1L Steve Merrill. And there is absolutely no better place to start on this Week 8 card than New Mexico State and UTEP. And who better to kick the excitement off here than Brian Power, who is going to tell us exactly how we should be looking at this game here. And leave it to you, Brian. You have all the games. You pick the most exciting ones week in and week out. So how are we looking at New Mexico State and UTEP? I would expect this from Trig, not from you. Tell me exactly how we're doing this here.
Yeah, certainly not the most attractive matchup on the slate, but I am seeing some value here in the I-10 rivalry, Joe. Las Cruces and El Paso Wednesday night doing battle. Of course, Conference USA has had a stranglehold on this weeknight slate of games. Trig and I, we actually break the games down every week on the Hustle Pod. If you're so inclined to check that out, we go through all the Tuesday through Friday games. And this is a game I spotlighted on the most recent show. I know New Mexico State's 4-3 and off back-to-back Wednesday night wins, but both of those were at home. Now they go on the road. This number's been bet up to 3, which is notable because this is the first time since 2018 that the Aggies are road favorites of a field goal or more if the line holds. And I think it's just a bit too much respect. Yes, I know everyone wants to fire Dana Dimmel at UTEP, but the Miners showed a pulse last week. They beat FIU on the road. There was a massive line swing in that game, if you remember. FIU opened as a dog, closed as like a 3.5-point favorite, but UTEP pulled the upset, and they did it with their fourth different quarterback used this season, Cade McConnell. He comes in, throws for 262 yards and a couple touchdowns in his first career start. What is incredible about that is in the first quarter alone, McConnell completed 5 passes for 175 yards, quite an average per completion there. But the UTEP offense came in averaging just 188 yards passing per game. So I think we're going to see a bit of a carryover, a bit of a spark, if you will, for the Miners. They were supposed to be contenders this year in Conference USA. New Mexico State, they just joined the conference prior to the start of the season. But as I talked about at the open to reference, this is a rivalry. These teams are no strangers to one another. They play every year. UTEP has had the edge, 10-3 straight up, 7-4-2 against the number the last 13 years. And that includes a 20-13 win last year here in El Paso, where the Miners were 17-point favorites. I know that they've taken a step back this year, Joe, but should they really go from 17-point favorites to 3-point dogs? I don't think so. I would take the points in a game that I know you and the rest of America will be watching. UTEP +3 is my lean on this one.
Can't wait. Going to record that on the VHS. How about it there, Trig, before we dive into a much more respectable game? Don't want to hear it, BP. Before we dive into a more respectable game here with Adam Trigger, I am going to remind you and make the suggestion that if college football content is what you're looking for, and if you are looking for more game previews, breakdowns, best bets, just hit that subscribe button if you're new here to Wager Talk TV. We've got plenty of it in this Week 8 and a pretty big one coming up here. Interesting spot for Marshall taking on JMU, James Madison, that keeps rolling here. And boy, oh boy, did they roll coming over Georgia Southern there. But now they got to take on Marshall, who kind of got rolled themselves. 3.5, 4, maybe even 4.5 showing up for JMU as a road favorite. What are you doing here, Trig, in this matchup?
Well, Joe, let's start there because that 4.5 is somewhat new. This was down to 3.5. Earlier today when Brian and I were talking about this game on the Hustle Short, it was 3.5, and it's crept back up to 4.5. Sort of feels like a huge head fake to me. James Madison has been faded by sharp money every week since the Virginia win. And all they've done is come out and just won and covered and done so with somewhat ease. 4 straight wins and covers. You go back, like I was on the Troy game. They win that easy, or they win as an underdog there. They beat Utah State relatively easily. That final score is deceiving. They were up like 21 in that game. And then last week, the Georgia Southern game, full 2-point move there almost. And they just come out and win absolutely no problem. It makes me want to like jump in with Marshall here. I'm looking for a good reason to do so. A good reason to do so could be the fact that Marshall, they do move the ball. Cam Fancher's a pretty good quarterback. They're averaging over 30 points per game and 420 yards per game. And, something tells me that they maybe lost that NC State game twice. This was a Marshall team. They were 4-0, a nice win over Virginia Tech, sort of rolling into NC State. A lot of respected people really liked Marshall in that game against NC State. And of course, they come up short, lose by a touchdown. I wonder if they kind of lost that game twice, right? They had to turn around, go on the road again to a very good Georgia State team, 5-1 Georgia State team, and they lose and kind of get blown out there. So, James Madison's been an absolute machine. We'll give them that. Jordan McLeod has been an outstanding quarterback. That was I guess my big criticism of James Madison coming into the season was, they would take a step back offensively without Centillo back there at quarterback. And that hasn't been the case. You could argue that McLeod has been better and he can run, he throws it there's nothing that James Madison has done that they deserve to be played against here, but they're now up to 4. You're seeing 4.5 some places. They're off a huge win. That Georgia Southern win was a big win for them for a couple of different reasons. They're 6-0. They've covered 4 straight games. Now they're on the road, short week, against a Marshall team that's lost back-to-back games. That's really got to be, hungry to come out and play a great game at home. I really like Marshall plus the points here. It is right on the edge of being a client play. I'm probably going to jump in with this. If I don't, it'll be like one of the first ones I leave off this week. I just feel like this is a great spot for the Thundering Herd. James Madison, they have to come back to earth at some point. And I think now that they've had this win and cover streak 4 in a row, they're just a little bit overvalued, even though they've played good enough to sort of substantiate this number. I think we're getting value here with Marshall. And I'm going to play on James Madison finally, maybe coming out a little bit flat after such a great stretch on the road. I'll go against that. I'll take the points with Marshall here. And I would not be surprised if the Thundering Herd hand James Madison their first loss of the season.
All right, Huntington, West Virginia. It is for JMU taking on the Herd. Should be a good one coming up this weekend. And double R1L, Steve Merrill, you, my man, for a big game breakdown. We're going to head to the top 25 here with Penn State taking on Ohio State. I know this is going to be part of your top 25 video this week in college football, or are you going to give us a sneak peek now and leave it out of the video? What are you going to do?
Oh, no, this will definitely be in the video. I thought you were going to make a snide remark and say, am I going to replace it with the New Mexico State game in my video? And by the way, speaking of top 25, James Madison is right now 26th in both the coaches and the AP polls. They're the first one in on the additional votes. So if they do beat Marshall, they will be probably top 25 next week. So it's another reason why that's a huge game for the Dukes on the road. And this is obviously the biggest game of the week, number 7 versus number 3. This will be in my top 25 video, but I wanted to give everyone a sneak peek here on Tuesday because we have so many Tuesday and Wednesday games this week. I made the little elves that live in my computer work a little faster and get the 10,000 database game simulation done a day early. Normally it's done on Wednesday. I got the numbers here for the Tuesday show. So the first time ever, we're going to take a deep dive and look at the simulation. And this one jumped out to me. 10,000 games run through the database. Average win for Ohio State in this game by nearly 9 points, 8.9 to be exact. So this line does look a little light. And I think there's several reasons why. First of all, Penn State, a perfect 6-0 straight up, but they're also 6-0 against the number. Last year, they were 9-3. That means Penn State is now 15-3 against the spread the last 2 seasons. You want to go back even deeper? They went 6-0-1 against the spread the last 7 of the season last year, 6-0 this year. So that means they have yet to fail to cover their past 13 games. They're 12-0-1 against the number. And when that happens with a high-profile team, the odds makers in the betting market have to start to overcorrect. And I think we get that here. So we get some line value with Ohio State at -4. And then on top of that, little advanced look, NFL Fade the Public video will be later this week as well. And we talk about public dogs all the time. my early numbers that I'm looking at as I bump the computer Tony Finn style is Duke is going to be a heavy dog and against Florida State, but also Penn State is looking like maybe the biggest public dog of the week. And it's not a surprise. Whenever you get a highly ranked team catching points, that's the one time the public all of a sudden shifts and wants to start playing underdogs. So there's lots of things going just from the perimeter that gets me looking at Ohio State. So let's look at the matchup itself. Two really good football teams. Penn State 6-0 straight up, 6-0 against the spread. On the season, they're averaging 5.5 yards per play against teams that allow 5.6. Ohio State is averaging 7 yards per play. And the big improvement with Ohio State this year is the defense. This is a team that's given up 3 touchdowns or more on average for the past 4 seasons. They're giving up 9.7 points, 4 yards per play. Penn State's defense is fantastic. There's no arguing that. 8 points, 3.4. Two really good defenses, but Ohio State's the better offense. They're at home, and it's a very reasonable point spread at -4. Once again, my ratings make it 9. And another reason I think it's cheap is last year they go into Penn State as a 15-point road favorite. Now they're only a 4-point home favorite, and they're actually better this year, Ohio State is, in my opinion. And they won that game last year by 13 points, even though they got outgained. They had a 7.5 to 6 yard per play advantage. So better team at home with a discounted price. Ohio State is a team I will be talking about a little bit more in the top 25 video later this week here on Wager Talk TV.
All right, good stuff there. A lot of eyeballs going to be looking forward to that game, Ohio State to Penn State. But we've got 3 dogs as best bets coming your way here. But don't forget, hit that subscribe button if college football content is what you are looking for. And if you have any questions about any of these games coming up in this Week 8 slate, drop them in the comment section. As Steve Merrill, Brian Power, Adam Trigger, they'll be monitoring the comment section all week long. So if you got a question for these guys, go ahead and drop it in the comment section as we turn back to Brian Power. And he is going to kick us off here with that very first dog as a best bet here. And I can only imagine, is it Division 1 or are you looking Division 2 as your dog? I'm not really quite sure. Maybe it's a JUCO play. I'm not sure. Trig would know that. But tell me, BP, where is your best bet going here to this week?
All right, so I started breaking down this week's college football slate Sunday night, as I always do, and I have to say, Joe, even a larger amount of ugly dogs circled than per usual, and let's talk Air Force Navy. It starts with this for me. If you're going to give me double digits in a game where the total is 37, I'm interested. Right there. And we know how these Commander-in-Chief trophy games go, right? Not a lot of points. I'd like to thank Ralph Michaels, who saw I was going to be breaking this game down on the show, and he sent me the following info. Since 2006, the under is a combined 40, 10, and 1 when any combo of Army, Navy, and Air Force play. Not only that, 6 of the last 7 Service Academy games have been decided by 7 points or less. So not a lot of scoring. Close games has been the rule when the Commander-in-Chief trophy is on the line. And I know Air Force is playing well. One of 3 group of 5 teams that are still unbeaten, along with James Madison and Liberty. Over the summer on Wager Talk today, I told everyone to bet Air Force at plus money to make the Mountain West Conference Championship game. That bet is certainly looking very good right now. But here's the thing. I don't like the spot for Air Force this week. We're talking about top 25 teams a moment ago. Air Force now ranked in the top 25 during the regular season for the first time since 2010. That shocked me to learn that. And we're laying points in Annapolis here. Obviously, the Falcons are going to be up for the game, but it's a noon Eastern kick from a team from the Mountain Time Zone. And last week, should be pointed out, the Falcons needed to rally to get the win at home against Wyoming, a game where they trailed the entire first half. I know Navy, not really inspiring that they were even in total yards with Charlotte last week and needed 3 turnovers just to win 14-0. But true to form, last year in Colorado Springs, this was a 13-10 game. Navy covered easily as a 2 TD dog. Last 3 seasons, the midshipmen, 15-7 ATS as a dog, including 11-3 when getting 10.5 to 21 points. So I am going to take the guys with the ships against the guys with the planes, Joe. Navy plus 11 is the best bet for.
All right, taking Navy over the now top 25 ranked Air Force there. That is our first dog best bet here of the show. Heading to dog number 2 here with Adam Trigger. And this dog is so ugly and is barking so out of control here. I can't even believe we're going to break this game down. But somebody's got to bet Arizona State taking on the Washington Huskies. And who better than Trig to tell us why, in God's name, would we take 4 touchdowns or better in this game against those Huskies right now?
So, Joe, I think that's the key here, right? Like this, we're not going to make a case for Arizona State to win. I mean, crazier things have happened, but we're talking about this game against the spread, and there's some precedence for Washington not covering these huge numbers. So let's go back to last week. Washington off a massive win, one of the best games of the season so far in college football. Unfortunately, my 5% play was Oregon +3. And I feel like I took somewhat of an unlucky push there. Like I really felt like Oregon was the better team in that game. They outgained Washington 541 to 415. They were 2 yards away from closing out the game, running out the clock. They basically had two downs to get 2 yards and finish the game. But tipped the cap to Washington because they couldn't do it. Washington got the ball back. They drove down the field, took the lead, and then of course Oregon missed a field goal that would have tied the game. So Washington escapes with a 3-point win. Oregon 0 for 3 on 4th down helped Washington out there a bit. But you know what? Like that's a totally different sort of game and handicap from this one, because now you got Washington coming in as the big favorite off of what was easily their most physical game of the season. Oregon is a very physical team, not your typical Pac-12 team. And so I have to imagine that their Washington softened up a little bit. I don't know if you'll see guys like inactive or miss this game, but you're certainly not going to see Washington out there just like lay in the wood if they get up 3-4 scores. I would think they certainly pump the brakes, probably get some reserves in there, because it's still a long season and Washington still has everything to play for. And so that's the first thing that sort of leads me to the Arizona State side. The second thing is the fact that Washington, they give points up, they give yardage up, and they give up points. If you look at their Pac-12 games this year, which, they had a pretty easy non-conference schedule when all things considered. They played Michigan State when they were a complete disaster, Tulsa. I'm really more concerned with the Pac-12 games. You've got Arizona, gave up 24 points, 342 yards, didn't cover. Cal, they gave up 502 yards, 32 points. They covered, but they also had 2 or 3 non-offensive touchdowns in that game, and were fortunate to not get backdoored at the end. I don't know that Arizona State is probably not as good. Well, they're not as good as Arizona. I would say they're roughly similar to Cal, but I don't think they're that much worse than either of those teams. And suddenly we're catching almost 4 touchdowns here with the Sun Devils. So I think that there's some big time value in the points. The number just feels too high to me. On the Arizona State side of the ball, they're not terrible against the run. Washington doesn't run the ball particularly well. This is a team, it's Michael Penix. It's one of the best passing offenses in the league, but they run the ball more as just to complement their passing attack. I have a feeling if Washington gets up 3 scores here, they're just going to run it and be okay with running it because, again, they've got to keep people healthy. They've got guys that are banged up coming in from last week. I think if Washington starts to creep into the cover territory, up 21, up 24, you're going to see them start running the ball, and they're going to be content just getting out with a win, which is another reason I think there's a ton of value with the points here. And then finally, Arizona State, they're not horrible offensively. I mean, the switch to Trenton Bourguet at quarterback has been okay. He's passed for over 300 yards in back-to-back games. So I do think that the Sun Devils can move it a little bit, and certainly will move it late if Washington takes their foot off the gas here. So I think Arizona State can hang around. If they don't and Washington gets up big early, I certainly think there's backdoor possibilities in this game. It all comes down to the number being too big here for me. I think the Sun Devils get the money and cover the big spread against Washington.
They ran 85 plays, Oregon did. So that defense was out on the field an awful lot for Washington here. We'll see how they react here. It feels like just an absolute terrible spot here for them taking on Arizona State. Take the 4 touchdowns, Trigg says, though. It'll probably go higher before it's all said and done and we get to the kickoff as well. So double R1L, Steve Merrill, ready to roll here with his best bet. This is a little bit less of a dog than what Trig just broke down for us here, but nonetheless, the dog's still the same here. Where are you going in this UConn South Florida matchup?
Yeah, this game a little less sexy than the Ohio State Penn State game that I just talked about. But Adam Trigger hates the Big Ten. He loves UConn. So I thought I'd talk about this game for him. And this is a UConn team that, keep in mind, before last season, before Jim Elmora takes over in his first year, had gone 3-21. They didn't even play. It was so bad they didn't even play in 2020. And they went 3-21 the other two full seasons on each side. So the fact they went 6-6 last year and then made a bowl game they lost, ended up going 6-7. They covered that bowl game against Marshall, by the way. We're coming full circle here on the show. We talked Marshall as well today. I think they're a little bit of an underrated team this season because they're having a mediocre season at 1-5, to say the least. Everyone expected them to maybe be a play-on team. They are 3-3 against the number, but ran by 10,000 simulation here, and I actually have Connecticut winning by 2. So not going to say it's much of a false favor, but I do think the wrong team is favored in this game. And I wanted to talk about it early in the week here as well, because currently, as we look at the Wager Talk live odds screen, we see a lot of 2.5s out there. So keep an eye. If you can get Connecticut at +3 or more, I think they're worth a look this week. I like them either way because I think the wrong team is favored, but I would hold off playing it early in the week, see if you can maybe get a +3. There were some 3s briefly at the opener, came down to 2.5. We'll see if there's any buyback here. But I'm not in a hurry to back South Florida on the road. This is what we call a false favorite, not only because I think the other team should be favored and will win. Numerous simulations I run have Connecticut winning the yardage battle, winning the game outright. But South Florida might be 3-4, but this is still a team that's been really bad the last couple seasons. Everything's fallen apart down there with that program. They've had 1 win or less each of the previous 3 years. In fact, they're combined of 4-29 heading into this season since 2020. So the 3-4s are marked improvement, but I think it's a bit phony. And they've played a very weak schedule, as has Connecticut. But one thing UConn has done is actually play tougher offensive opponents. Their opponents on average have averaged 6.1 yards per play, and they've only allowed 6. South Florida's allowed 6.4 against a weaker schedule. So I think we get the better defensive team as a home dog in what should be a focus spot because it's a winnable game for a 1-5 team. I don't want to say this is a big game for UConn, but it's a big game for UConn. And then on top of that, they're coming off a bye week as well. So I think it's a good setup, especially since South Florida has to travel after back-to-back blowout losses against UAB and Florida Atlantic. So I like the situational setup off the bye, and I think we're getting the wrong team favored here. Take the underdog Connecticut +2.5, but hold off. See if maybe you can get a +3 when this game kicks off Saturday, 3:30 Eastern on CBS Sports Network.
You're the fastest tempo team in college football there, South Florida. A lot of fun to watch, but boy, that defense gets out on the field quickly when you go 3 and out. It's like, wait a minute, what, didn't they just get the ball? No, time to get back out. 3 and out, see you later. It only took 18 seconds. Unbelievable there. So UConn, Arizona State, and Navy, 3 dogs as best bets here for the show. But we're just getting started. Plenty of action coming up here in this Week 8 slate, and we've got you covered. All you have to do, simply hit that video that's on your screen right now, and you'll get access to all of the top 25 game previews we have along with those best bets. Go ahead, hit that subscribe button, and make plans to come back and join us again tomorrow for another edition of the College Football Kickoff Show. Good luck this week.